They called for backup. Then the true monsters of the galaxy emerged. The silence began at NEO 417 Galactic Standard Time. Observer Teln Varas was alone in the astrocartography wing of the Galactic Observational Network when the first signal stopped. She barely noticed. Routine fluctuations happened constantly. Solar interference, relay malfunctions, scheduled maintenance. A single lost connection meant nothing. By 0630, 17 worlds had gone silent. By 0945, 33. By 1511, all 47 inhabited systems in Sector Val 9 had ceased transmitting. 600 billion souls and not a single voice reaching outward. Teln's crystalline form pulsed with agitated light as she recalibrated the sensor arrays for the 8th time. The Kixari communicated through modulated luminescence, and right now her body flickered in patterns that translated roughly to impossible. Recheck. Impossible. She had been an astrocartographer for 63 years. She had mapped nebulae, tracked rogue planets, catalogued the births and deaths of stars. She had never seen an entire region of space simply stop talking. The data made no sense. The worlds were still there. Planetary masses confirmed. Orbital mechanics unchanged. Deep scans showed power grids active. Atmospheric compositions normal. Thermal signatures consistent with populated cities. Every indicator suggested life as usual, except for the life itself. No communication signals, no navigation beacons, no emergency broadcasts, no comm chatter, no entertainment feeds, no background radiation from billions of devices constantly talking to each other. Just silence. Warm, lit, functioning silence. Teln expanded her luminescence field and triggered the emergency protocol beacon. Within minutes, her supervisor materialized in holographic form, his own light patterns sharp with concern. Explain, he pulsed. Sector Val 9 is gone. Teln replied, not destroyed. Silent. Define silent. Zero biological neural signatures. Zero electromagnetic communication. Power consumption normal. Atmospheric oxygen exchange rates unchanged, but no detectable consciousness anywhere. Her supervisor's light dimmed. The Kixari equivalent of a held breath. You're describing 47 worlds with active infrastructure and no inhabitants. Correct. That's not possible. I know. Recheck everything. I have. 11 times. The supervisor's hologram flickered. Send the full data package to Central Council. Flag it maximum priority. If this is real. His light patterns trailed off into something that didn't translate well but carried the emotional weight of profound dread. Teln compiled the report and launched it through priority channels. Then she did what any good scientist does when confronted with the impossible. She stared at the data and tried to find the mistake she must have made. She found none. Instead, she watched in real time as system number 48 stopped transmitting. 49 followed 6 minutes later. Whatever was happening, it was still spreading. The Galactic Council chamber on Axis Prime could hold representatives from 300 species comfortably. Today, it held barely 60, summoned on emergency notice with minimal explanation. The chamber's architecture was ancient. Vaulted ceilings designed to accommodate everything from floating gas entities to massive silicon-based life forms. The air mixture was carefully balanced to keep everyone alive, if not entirely comfortable. Council Director Maroth Ven of the Saurian Confederacy sat on his heated platform, tail coiled beneath him, eyes half closed in what his political opponents often mistook for disinterest. It was not. Maroth was always calculating. Always 3 moves ahead. Right now, he was calculating how to prevent panic. Observer Varas, he said, voice carrying easily in the chamber's acoustics. You're asking this council to believe that 51 inhabited star systems have somehow lost their populations. Teln's holographic presence shimmered. Not lost, Director. Present but undetectable. All biological neural activity has ceased registering on any scan type we possess, but infrastructure remains active. The worlds are occupied, just not by anything we can measure as conscious. Sensor malfunction, Maroth said flatly, across 11 different observational arrays, using 7 different scanning technologies, simultaneously. Equipment ages, systems fail. Not like this. Maroth's inner eyelid flicked in irritation. Then what's your explanation, observer? Mass ascension, spontaneous evolutionary transcendence. Divine rapture. I don't have one. Exactly. Maroth leaned forward. What you're describing violates everything we understand about consciousness, biology, and physics. The most logical conclusion is systemic sensor failure, possibly caused by some new form of stellar radiation we haven't catalogued yet. Alarming. Yes. Worth investigation, certainly. Worth council-wide panic? Absolutely not. Investigator Kessa Hearn rose from her delegation's seating area. The Vren were insectoid, four-armed, and structured their entire society around cold logic and empirical evidence. Kessa had built her career on going where evidence led, regardless of comfort. Director Ven, she said, voice sharp and precise, I've reviewed Observer Varos's data personally. The probability of simultaneous sensor failure across multiple independent systems is mathematically negligible. Moreover, 12 survey vessels have now failed to return from border zone investigations. Ships don't vanish because of radiation. Ships malfunction. Maroth counted 12 times in 72 hours. The border zones are poorly mapped. Perhaps there's a navigational hazard we haven't identified. Kessa's four hands gestured in a pattern that conveyed barely restrained frustration. Director, your political caution is preventing necessary action. Every hour we debate is another hour this phenomenon spreads. We're now at 53 silent systems. If the expansion rate continues, we could see hundreds of worlds affected within the week. Maroth's scales darkened. A threat display. And what action do you propose? Investigate. We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know if it's dangerous to approach. We don't even know if there's anything actually wrong. For all we know, these civilizations discovered some new technology and simply stopped using conventional while simultaneously becoming undetectable to biological scans and abandoning 12 rescue vessels. I'm simply advocating for measured response over acknowledging that something unprecedented is happening. The chamber erupted in overlapping translations as representatives argued. Maroth let it continue for exactly 40 seconds before triggering the silence protocol. A harmonic tone filled the space, biologically programmed to capture attention across species. Investigator Hearn, he said once quiet returned. You want to investigate? Fine. Take a small team, establish a perimeter, gather better data. But we will not initiate panic protocols over what might be a sensor anomaly. Are we clear? Kessa's mandibles clicked frustration, but also acceptance. Clear, Director. Good. This council stands in recess until we have actionable intelligence. As the representatives filed out, Tillen's hologram approached Kessa's station. He's afraid. The Kigzari observed. That's why he's resisting. Fear in a politician is dangerous. Kessa replied. It makes them protect their position instead of their people. What will you do? Kessa's four eyes focused on the star map displaying the silent zone's expanding boundary. Exactly what he authored. Investigate, gather data. She paused, and hope we find something that makes sense before it's too late. But in her core neural ganglia, in the part of her mind that the Vren trained specifically to calculate odds, Kessa was already running probability matrices, and they all pointed toward the same conclusion. Whatever was happening in Sector Val 9 wasn't going to stop at 53 systems. It was going to keep spreading until something stopped it, or until there was nothing left to spread to. Kessa's research vessel, the methodical inquiry, drifted at the edge of the silent region, passive sensors running continuous sweeps. She stood in the observation bay with her lead sensor technician, a methane breather named Tool, whose environmental suit hummed soft. Show me visual confirmation, Kessa ordered. The viewport filled with enhanced imagery from the nearest silent world. Veltrin 4, population 78 million. The planet hung serene against the black city lights visible on the night side. Orbital stations glinting in reflected starlight. Magnify urban center delta. The image zoomed. Kessa leaned closer. The city was fine, pristine even. Streets visible through atmospheric clarification showed vehicles positioned mid-transit. Public transit systems appeared operational. She could see the heat signatures from engine. Power distribution was active. Environmental domes maintained pressure. Thermal scan, she said. Color overlays appeared. Reds and oranges clustered where she'd expect them. Industrial centers, residential heating, cooking facilities. She saw a building with a distinctly hot signature in what her database identified as a public meal distribution center. Food preparation in progress. Tool noted. Temperature consistent with active cooking, but no one to eat it. Correct. Kessa felt her stomach ganglia tighten. Time-stamped anomaly analysis. When did food preparation begin? Approximately 3 hours before the communication blackout. Tool replied after a moment. Thermal patterns suggest standard meal preparation routine. The facility has maintained cooking temperature ever since. For 72 hours. Yes. Investigator. So someone had started making lunch. And then what? Vanished mid-preparation, leaving the stoves running. Probe deployment. Kessa ordered. Atmospheric entry package. I want ground-level video confirmation. Investigator. Tool's voice carried warning. All previous probe deployments have resulted in signal loss upon crossing the boundary. Then we'll get what we can before signal loss. Deploy. The probe launched a streamlined cylinder equipped with high-resolution cameras and sample collectors. It crossed the threshold at controlled velocity, transmitting continuously. At first, nothing unusual happened. The probe entered atmosphere, deployed heat shielding, angled toward the target city. Video feed remained clear. Telemetry stayed stable. Kessa watched the ground approach. Closer. Buildings resolving into individual structures. Streets becoming visible. The probe descended toward a major intersection, slowing for optimal observation. The video feed showed a city caught mid-moment. Ground vehicles positioned in intersection, some mid-turn. Traffic signals cycling normally. Red to green to yellow. A public transport vehicle stopped at a platform. Doors open. Personal belongings scattered on sidewalks. A child's toy mid-bounce frozen at apex. A merchant stall with goods displayed. Payment terminal active. No merchant, and no people. No Veltrin, no bodies, no signs of struggle or evacuation. Just an entire civilization that had stopped existing between one heartbeat and the next. Biological scan. Kessa ordered. Voice tight. No neural activity detected. No thermal signatures consistent with Veltrin biology. No biochemical traces in atmosphere matching inhabited city baseline. The probe descended to street level. Camera panning. It drifted through the open door of a residential building. Inside, furniture arranged for occupation. A meal half-eaten on a table still radiating faint heat. A communication device displaying an unsent message. Will arrive home soon. Soon had never come. Investigator. Tool's voice sharpened. Probe telemetry showing temporal anomaly. Kessa's eyes snapped to the data stream. Explain. Chronometer desynchronized. Probe internal clock registers elapsed time of 14 seconds since entering city limits. Our tracking shows 41 seconds. Signal lag. Negative. Quantum entangled time markers are diverging. The probe is experiencing time dilation relative to our reference frame. Kessa's mind raced. So inside the affected zone, time is unclear. The dilation isn't consistent. It's fluctuating. 3-second windows where local time nearly stops. Then brief synchronization. Then the video feed flickered. The image showed the same intersection. Then showed it again. Same vehicles, same positions, same traffic light turning green. Then again, and again. The probe was transmitting the same 3.7-second loop, repeating. Pull it back, Kessa ordered. Emergency recall. Signal sent. Probe is not responding to the telemetry flatlined. Not destroyed. Just gone, as if it had never existed. Kessa stood very still for a long moment. Investigator. Tool asked quietly. Launch 6 more probes. Kessa said. Different entry vectors. Different target cities. I want confirmation that this is consistent across the zone. And if we lose all 6, then we'll know that whatever is happening there doesn't want to be observed. She turned from the viewport. And we'll need to find someone willing to go in anyway. The probes all vanished. 6 different approach vectors. 6 Different cities across 3 different worlds. Same result every time. Temporal desynchronization. Signal loop disappearance. Kessa transmitted her findings to Central Council with a simple addendum. Phenomenon confirmed to be temporally active and expanding. Immediate intervention required. Conventional investigation methods insufficient. The response came back within the hour. And it wasn't from the Council. It was from archivist Yulo Pren of the Entheri Collective. The Entheri were aquatic, living their entire lives in carefully maintained pressure suits filled with ammonia-rich fluid. They had evolved in high-pressure ocean trenches where light never reached, developing instead a culture built entirely on memory, passed down through biochemical encoding across generations. And Entheri didn't just remember their own life, they remembered their ancestors' lives, thousands of years of accumulated experience encoded in their neural chemistry. Yulo was considered one of the greatest living archivists. She could access genetic memories spanning 4 millennia. Her message was brief. I've seen this before, or rather my ancestors have. Request immediate meeting. Kessa met her in a secured conference room aboard a neutral station. Yulo's pressure suit hissed softly as she settled into the fluid-filled seat, her bioluminescent markers glowing pale blue through the transparent faceplate. 4,217 years ago, Yulo began without preamble. The Entheri was still confined to our homeworld, but we maintained extensive astronomical observations. We tracked unusual phenomena across the galaxy, cataloging everything we saw. We were afraid. You understand, afraid that whatever existed in the stars would eventually notice us. What did you observe? Kessa asked. A region of space called the Kethran Cluster, 68 inhabited systems, home to 7 different spacefaring civilizations. Over the course of 26 days, all of them stopped transmitting. Kessa's posture stiffened. The same phenomenon. We believed. My ancestors sent long-range observation drones, slower than light, but patient. By the time they arrived, 143 years had passed. Do you know what they found? Silent worlds. Worse, Yulo's bioluminescence pulsed in a pattern, suggesting deep distress. They found worlds where time had stopped. Cities, frozen mid-moment, weather patterns locked in place, ocean waves that never completed their crash against shores, and inside, she paused. Inside the cities, the drones detected something our ancestors called presence without being. Neural energy signatures but fractured, scattered, as if consciousness had been separated from physical form and trapped in eternal loops. Kessa felt her blood cool. Were they alive? The definition becomes meaningless. They weren't dead. They weren't dormant. They were experienced forever. The same moment, repeated infinitely, an eternal present with no past and no future. What stopped it? Yulo's lights dimmed. Nothing stopped it. It simply moved on. After approximately 200 years, the phenomenon dissolved. Time resumed normally, but the populations never recovered. Their neural patterns had been so thoroughly fragmented by the experience that when physical reality reasserted, their bodies remained but their minds were empty. 79 billion beings, reduced to biological automatons. They died within weeks. The silence in the room was heavy. Did your ancestors discover what caused it? Kessa finally asked. They gave it a name. The folding. They theorized it was some form of dimensional membrane that passed through normal space. A natural phenomenon, like a storm, where it touched conscious minds. It phase shifted them slightly out of temporal synchronization with reality. Consciousness folded inward, experiencing its own final moment recursively, and there's no defense. My ancestors tried to develop one. The research consumed 3 generations. They failed. Yulo's lights flickered in what might have been remembered grief. The conclusion was simple. If the folding ever touched the Entheri homeworld, our species would end, not through violence, through temporal isolation. We would experience our extinction forever, unable to die or escape. Kessa absorbed this. Why are you telling me this? Because the Galactic Council needs to understand what we're facing. This isn't an enemy that can be negotiated with or fought. It's not even hostile in any meaningful sense. It's simply what it is, a natural predator of consciousness itself. Then what can we possibly do? Yulo was quiet for a moment. Then, There is one piece of information my ancestors preserved, a fragment from the Catherine cluster, recovered from the oldest drone's database, before the folding completely consumed those worlds. One species managed to send out a message. It was brief, just 3 words, repeated continuously until the transmission ended. What words? Call the human. Kessa's 4 hands clenched. What? My ancestors didn't understand it either. Humans didn't exist 4,000 years ago. Not as a spacefaring species. The message made no sense. It was dismissed as temporal corruption of the data. Yulo leaned forward, her suit creaking. But now humans do exist, and you have to ask yourself, investigator, why would a dying civilization's last act be to invoke a species that didn't exist yet? The debate in the council chamber lasted 6 hours. Marath then opposed the motion with every political tool he possessed. Calling the humans was, he argued, an act of desperation that would set a dangerous precedent. We have protocols, he insisted. We have procedures. We don't summon the quarantined species just because we face something difficult. This isn't difficult, Kessa countered. This is existential. 68 systems are now silent. The expansion rate is accelerating. At current projections, we'll see 500 affected systems within the month. Perhaps it will stop on its own. And if it doesn't, if the folding continues until it reaches core worlds, until it touches Axis Prime, what will you say then, Director? Marath's scales darkened. The humans are quarantined for a reason. Investigator, they're psychologically unstable, prone to violence, unreliable. They're quarantined because they frighten us, Tell interjected. The Kiksari's holographic form pulsed with unusual intensity. Because they think differently, because we don't understand their minds. But perhaps that's exactly what we need right now. A species that doesn't think like we do. They're dangerous, Marath insisted. So is extinction, Kessa replied. The vote was called. 217 species representatives present. 144 voted to activate the emergency beacon. 73 abstained or voted against, citing concerns about human unpredictability. The beacon was authorized. It was transmitted from Axis Prime's most powerful communications array, directed toward the region of space designated as the human quarantine zone. 100 star systems given to humanity 319 years ago, in exchange for their agreement to remain isolated from galactic affairs. The signal was simple. Emergency Protocol 7 activated, requesting immediate assistance. Nature of crisis. Consciousness predation phenomenon. Current affected population 680. The transmission ended. The council waited. Marath stood. We've just invited chaos into our house, he said quietly. I hope you're all prepared for what walks through the door. Then he left the chamber. The first response came 4 hours late. Not from the human quarantine zone's official government channels. Not from military command. Not from diplomatic corps. From a single maintenance outpost at the edge of human territory, operated by a skeleton crew of 3. The message was text only, written in simple galactic standard. Received your beacon. We know what you're dealing with. Retrieval Corps is waking up. Hold position. Don't send anyone else in. We're coming. Rixteln stared at the message. Retrieval Corps. What is that? Kessa didn't know. Neither did anyone else. They were about to find out. Technician Rix Calden had been stationed at Border Outpost Echo 7 for 2 years. It was boring work. The outpost was little more than a sensor hub and communication relay, positioned at the edge of human space specifically to monitor the beacon network that the Galactic Council had insisted on installing. Most days nothing happened. Rix performed maintenance, read books, learned new languages, and tried not to go insane from the isolation. Today was not most days. When the beacon activated, Rix had been replacing a faulty coolant pump in the station's aging environmental system. The alert tone had startled him so badly he'd dropped his wrench, which had bounced off the deck plating and disappeared into a gap he'd never be able to reach. He'd scrambled to the communications bay and stared at the incoming signal for a full 30 seconds before his brain processed what he was seeing. Emergency Protocol 7. Consciousness predation. 680 billion affected. Oh,
he'd said aloud to the empty station. Oh Then he'd done exactly what border outpost protocols required. He'd forwarded the beacon to Terran Command, flagged maximum priority, and sent his own brief acknowledgement to the originating council. Now, 12 hours later, Kessa Hearn's face filled his communication screen. She'd requested direct contact with Rix, and station protocols allowed it for ongoing emergencies. You said you know what we're dealing with, Kessa said without preamble. Explain. Rix scratched his beard. 3 weeks unshaven. Because who was going to see him? And considered how to translate complex physics into simple terms. Okay, he said. Imagine you've got an old airlock. Really old. The kind where the pressure sensors have gotten confused over the years. Sometimes it thinks the exterior is pressurized when it's actually vacuum. Sometimes it thinks the interior is vacuum when it's actually pressurized. It forgets which side is which. Kessa's mandibles twitched. Continue. Now imagine someone steps into that airlock. The door closes behind them. They hit the cycle button. The airlock has to decide which side is safe. Where does this person belong? Rix leaned forward. But the sensor is broken. It can't tell. So it does what broken systems do. It freezes. Doesn't open either door. Just holds that person in the transition state forever. Not quite inside. Not quite outside. Just stuck between. The folding. Kessa said quietly. That's what you're calling it. Good name. Rix nodded. It's essentially a consciousness airlock, a quantum phase state where minds get trapped in the transition between experience time and physical time. The membrane passes through space, catches any active neural patterns, and phase shifts them into recursive loops. Your people aren't dead. They're just stuck in the airlock, experiencing the same moment of transition forever. How do you know this? Rix hesitated. Because we've dealt with it before. When? About 140 years ago. Small-scale event. Just one world. Human colony. 30 million people. The folding touched it. By the time anyone understood what was happening, they were gone. Kessa's 4 eyes focused intently. What did you do? At first, nothing. We didn't know how. We tried everything. Technological solutions. Quantum disruption. Even attempted.
Create artificial temporal anchors. Nothing worked. Rex's expression darkened. Then someone figured out you can't solve it technologically. You have to solve it neurologically. What does that mean? It means someone has to go in, experience the loop with them, synchronize neural patterns until you're both stuck in the same moment. Then you hold on to them, really hold on to them, and pull yourself out. If you're strong enough, if you maintain your own temporal identity while fully experiencing theirs, you can bring them back. Kessa was silent for a long moment. That sounds psychologically devastating. It is. Rex's voice was flat. The first person who successfully retrieved someone from the folding spent 3 months in psychiatric care afterward. They'd experienced someone else's death, not just witnessed it. Experienced it over and over for 7 hours subjective time. It broke something in them, but they developed a method.
Yeah.
Took 30 years and a lot of broken people, but eventually we trained specialists, neurological divers, people who could enter the folding, sync with trapped minds, and pull them back without losing themselves completely. We call them the retrieval core. How many do you have? Rex smiled without humor. Not enough. Never enough. Will they come? They're already coming. Investigator. They were coming the moment that beacon went active. Probably scrambling every available ship right now. He paused. But you need to understand something. What we do, it's not a rescue operation. It's a sacrifice operation. Every person we pull back costs the diver a piece of themselves. Emotional scars. Memory fragmentation. Some divers only last 1 or 2 retrievals before they can't do it anymore. Others can manage a dozen before they break. None of them come out the same. Then why do they volunteer? Rex looked at her for a long moment. Because someone has to. Because 600 billion beings are trapped in eternal moments of terror and confusion, and they can't free themselves, and because we're the only ones who can help. Kessa processed this. When will they arrive? 48 hours, maybe less. The Corps keeps rapid response ships on standby. Rex's expression softened slightly. In the meantime, investigator, I'd recommend preparing your people psychologically. What they're about to see is going to challenge everything they think they know about human. What do you mean? You're about to learn why we're really quarantined, Rex said. Not because we're dangerous in the way you think, because we're willing to carry burdens that would destroy anyone else. And that scares the shit out of everyone. The transmission ended. Kessa sat in the empty communication room for a long time, thinking about airlocks and broken sensors, and people who volunteered to carry other people's nightmares. She wondered what kind of species built a civilization around that. She was about to find out. The Terran Retrieval Corps arrived 36 hours later. 12 ships, small by military standards, none larger than a frigate. Their hulls were dark gray, unadorned except for simple identification markers. No weapons visible. No intimidating architecture. They looked more like medical vessels than anything else, which Kessa supposed they were. The lead ship transmitted docking coordinates and a request for immediate briefing with senior officials. Kessa, Talon, and a reluctant Maroth then assembled in the conference bay aboard the neutral station, Axiom's Rest. Commander Sarai Okoye entered the room, and Kessa's first thought was, she looks tired. Humans were small compared to most species. Bipedal, soft-skinned, fragile-looking. Sarai was average height for her kind, with dark brown skin and close-cropped black hair graying at the temples. She wore a simple uniform, dark blue with minimal insignia, no medals, no decorations. But her eyes, Kessa had studied many species' eyes in her career. Eyes told you things, fear responses, threat assessment, mental state. Human eyes were particularly expressive, she'd read. They could convey complex emotions with tiny movements. Sarai Okoye's eyes were deep, dark brown, and they held something Kessa had never quite seen before. Not fear, not confidence. Something older, something that had seen too much and chosen to keep looking anyway. Commander Okoye, Maroth began, his voice carrying formal chill. Thank you for responding to our beacon. However, I want to make clear that Director, Sarai interrupted gently. With respect, we don't have time for posturing. Every hour we waste is another hour. 600 billion people spent trapped in moments of fear. So let's skip the part where you tell me you're concerned about human intervention. And I'll skip the part where I assure you we're professional. Can we agree to that? Maroth's scales darkened, but he nodded stiffly. Good. Sarai turned to Kessa. You're the lead investigator. Show me what you've got. Kessa activated the holographic display. 68 systems highlighted in red. Expansion vectors projected. Probe data compiled. Temporal anomaly readings. All of it. Sarai studied the data in silence for 3 full minutes. When she spoke, her voice was clinical. Confirmed folding event. Class Delta widespread. Accelerating 3.7-second loop iteration. That's bad. Bad how? Talon asked. Longer loops are easier to navigate. More psychological space to maneuver. 3.7 is barely enough time to identify the anchor moment before it resets. Sarai zoomed the display, examining specific worlds. You said no one's come back from 12 ships vanished investigating. Kessa confirmed. They're not gone, just stuck. We'll retrieve them too if we can. Sarai turned to face the group. Here's what's going to happen. My teams will conduct immediate dive operations, targeting the most densely populated worlds first. We'll work in rotating shifts, 4 hours dive time maximum, before mandatory rest. Each team consists of 3 divers and 2 support technicians. How many people can you retrieve per dive? Maroth asked. Sarai's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those deep eyes. Depends. Best case scenario with optimal synchronization, maybe 20-30,000 per dive. Worst case, a few hundred. Kessa did the mental math. 68 systems, average population per system maybe 10 billion. That's 680 billion total. Even at 30,000 per dive, that's not enough, she said quietly. No, Sarai agreed. It's not. Then what? Then we save who we can. Sarai's voice was steady, and we hope the folding moves on before we run out of divers. You're talking about triage, Maroth said, choosing who lives and who stays trapped. Yes, that's monstrous. Yes, Sarai met his eyes. It is. Do you have a better option? Maroth said nothing. Sarai nodded. That's what I thought. She turned to Kessa. I'll need detailed population density maps for all affected worlds, priority targeting for highest population centers, and I'll need your people to stay far back from the boundary. When we're working, things get complicated. Your ships will be at risk if they're too close. Why? Because when we pull someone out of the folding, we're essentially tearing a hole in the phase membrane. Sometimes other things slip through. Temporal echoes, fragmented consciousness. It's unstable. Sarai's jaw tightened. Last time we did a major retrieval operation, 3 support ships got caught in a backwash event. Crew experienced temporal displacement, aged 7 years in 4 minutes. They survived, but they remembered all 7 years, alone, in darkness, with nothing to do but think. Sarai's voice was very quiet. Psychological damage was severe. The room was silent. We'll begin operations in 6 hours. Sarai said, my people need rest before we start. Diving exhausted is how you lose yourself permanently. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. You're going to see things that disturb you. My divers will come back changed after each dive. Some of them will scream, some will cry, some will just stare at nothing for hours. Don't try to comfort them. Don't ask them about it. Just let them process. They know what they signed up for. Why do they do it? Tellen asked softly. If it costs them so much. Sarai looked at the Kasari's glowing form. Because someone asked for help, she said simply, and we're the only ones who can answer. Then she left. Kessa stared at the closed door for a long time. Maroth broke the silence. She's right. They are monstrous. No, Kessa said slowly. I don't think they are. I think they just understand something we don't. What? That being able to help and choosing not to. That's the real monstrosity. The first dive happened at dawn station time. Kessa watched from the observation bay as the human ships positioned themselves at the boundary. The Endurance, Commander Okoya's vessel, was closest to the affected zone. Through enhanced imaging, Kessa could see the dive team preparing on the ship's bridge. 3 humans in specialized suits, not armor. Something softer, more like medical equipment. Neural interface cables ran from the suits to central processing units. The divers' faces were calm, focused. One of them was young, couldn't have been more than 25 standard years. She caught Kessa staring through the visual feed and raised her hand in a small way. Then she turned and walked toward the deployment bay, initiating dive protocol. A human technician's voice came through the open channel. Team Alpha, confirm readiness. Ready. 3 voices responded. Neural baselines established. Temporal anchors calibrated. Medical monitoring active. A pause. You are authorized for dive. Bring them home. The deployment craft detached from the Endurance. A small shuttle designed specifically for approach work. It crossed the boundary, and immediately Kessa saw the telemetry shift. Time dilation effects appeared. The shuttle's internal clock began desynchronizing from external reference. Then the video feed activated from inside the shuttle. The lead diver, her name was Chen, Kessa read from the manifest, spoke calmly. Approaching target city. Population density estimated at 400,000. We're looking for residential district theta. Families, kids on their way to school. That's going to be the anchor moment. Copy that. The technician replied. Your subjective time is now dilating. We're reading 4:1 variance. 4 seconds for you, 1 for us. Understood. The shuttle landed in a plaza. The divers disembarked. Through their helmet cameras, Kessa saw the frozen city, exactly as the probes had shown. Life caught mid-moment, but seeing it through human eyes was different. The divers moved slowly, carefully, their heads turning to take in every detail. There, Chen said, pointing. School transport vehicle, 46 children aboard. Based on thermal count, that's our priority. They approached the vehicle. Inside, Kessa could see small forms, Veltran juveniles, frozen mid-laugh. Mid-conversation, mid-existence, Chen placed her hand on the vehicle's exterior. Her voice changed, became softer, more intimate. Okay, beginning synchronized. What happened next? Kessa would never be able to fully describe. The video feed didn't change visually, but something in the audio shifted. A sound appeared. Not quite sound. More like the memory of sound. Children's voices, laughing, talking, excited about something. Then the sound cut off. Then it started again. Same laughter, same words. Again. The loop. Chen's breathing changed, became shallow. I've got them. I'm in the moment. School trip. They're going to the geological gardens. They're excited. One of them brought snacks to share. Another one is worried about forgetting their homework. It's just a normal day. Can you establish anchor? Working on it. I need to. Chen's voice caught. I need to feel what they felt when it happened. The confusion, the fear, the moment they realized something was wrong. Silence for 10 seconds. Then Chen gasped. Oh God. They knew, for just a fraction of a second. They knew something was taking them. They were afraid. Chen, maintain boundaries. The technician warned. I'm okay. Chen's voice steadied, anchoring to the moment, synchronizing temporal identity, holding. Your vitals are spiking. I said I'm okay. Chen snapped, then softer. Sorry, I'm focused. Beginning extraction. The video feed wavered. For just an instant, Kessa thought she saw something, a ripple in space, a folding of light, as if reality was paper being carefully unfolded. Then the children moved, just a tiny motion, a shift of weight, a blink. But after 72 hours of absolute stillness, it was like watching stone come alive. I've got 6. Chen breathed. 6 stable connections, pulling them out. Come on, babies, come with me. It's okay. You're safe. Follow my voice. Follow. Another ripple. The children moved again, more deliberately, their eyes focused. One of them made a sound. Confusion. Fear. It's okay, Chen said, her voice somehow audible to them, despite physics suggesting it shouldn't be. You're safe. Something weird happened, but you're safe now. I need you to hold on to this feeling. This moment right now. Talking to me. Hold on to it. Don't let go. More children began moving. 10, 15, 20. Chen, you're at maximum safe load. The technician warned. I can take more. Just a few more. These kids are right here. I can feel them. They're so close. Your neural coherence is dropping. Just a few more. 30 children. 35. Then Chen screamed. Not pain. Something else. Something primal. Abort. The technician shouted. Chen, abort extraction. No, I have them. I'm not leaving them. Your pattern is fragmenting. I don't care. The video feed dissolved into static. When it cleared, Chen was on her knees inside the transport vehicle, surrounded by confused, crying Veltran children. Her helmet was off, violation of protocol, and tears streamed down her face. But the children were moving, conscious, free. 38. Chen whispered. I got 38. Chen, you went 15 over safe limit. The technician said, voice tight with controlled anger. You could have been trapped with them, but I wasn't. Chen stood shakily, gathering the children, and they're out. That's what matters. The extraction took 2 hours, getting the children calmed down, transported back across the boundary, transferred to medical evaluation. Chen sat through debriefing in silence, then walked to her quarters without a word. Kessa watched her go. The young woman who'd waved confidently before the dive was gone. The person who returned looked 10 years older, and they'd saved 38 people. 679,999,962,000 to go. The dives continued, team after team, world after world. Kessa watched dozens of them, each one similar, each one devastating. She saw a diver named Marcus spend 4 hours, synchronized with a group of industrial workers, experiencing their final moment of a shift change, mundane, tired, looking forward to going home over and over, until he could anchor them and pull them free. He retrieved 214. When he came out, he couldn't speak for 6 hours, just sat in the observation bay, staring at nothing. She saw a diver named Yuki enter a medical facility,
and synchronize with doctors mid-surgery. The surgery had been going well. The patient had been stable. Then the folding took them, and they spent eternity frozen in the moment of concentration and hope. Yuki pulled out 87 people. She vomited for 20 minutes afterward, and refused to eat for 2 days. She saw a diver named James target a residential tower, and synchronize with a family having dinner, parents and 3 children, laughing about something silly one of the kids had said. James pulled all 5 of them out. When he emerged from the dive, he asked to speak with the family, spent an hour with them, just talking, crying. The parents thanked him. He told them he was sorry he couldn't have gotten there sooner. They experienced that loop for 72 hours. He told Kessa later, voice hollow, that's not 72 hours of clock time. That's 72 hours of subjective experience in a 3.7-second loop. Do you know how many iterations that is? How many times they lived that same moment? Kessa did the math. 72 hours was 259,200 seconds, divided by 3.7 seconds per loop. 70,000 repetitions. She whispered. 70,000 times that father watched his daughter laugh at her own joke. 70,000 times the mother felt pride at her family's happiness. 70,000 times the children felt safe and loved. James's hands shook, and then I tore them out of it, back into a reality where they learned that moment was a trap, that their happiness was being used to torture them. You saved them. Did I? James looked at her with haunted eyes. Or did I just trade one kind of hell for another? They'll remember all 70,000 iterations, forever. That memory doesn't go away. He walked away before Kessa could respond. The toll mounted, not on the victims, on the rescuer. After 5 days of continuous operations, rotating teams, brutal efficiency, the Retrieval Corps had pulled approximately 12 million people free. 12 million out of 680 billion. It wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough. And the divers were breaking. Kessa attended a medical briefing, where Dr. Elias Tam, the Corps' senior neuroscientist, presented the casualty reports. We've had 7 divers suffer major neural coherence breakdown, he said, voice clinical but tired. They've been removed from dive rotation permanently. 11 more are showing early signs of fragmentation, memory blending, identity dissociation, temporal disorientation. They can maybe handle 2-3 more dives before they'll need to be pulled. The rest, he gestured at the data, the rest are holding together through sheer stubbornness. But it's not sustainable. How long can we continue operations? Commander Okoye asked. At current intensity, 2 more weeks, maybe 3, then we'll have no functional divers left. Maroth, who'd been observing the briefing remotely, spoke up. Then you should stop. You've done what you can. No one can ask more than people can ask for exactly as much as they need. Sarai interrupted. And these people need us to keep going. At the cost of destroying your own people. Yes. That's insane. That's the job. Sarai's voice was iron hot. Every person who volunteered for the Corps knew the cost. They made their choice, and they're not stopping until either everyone is free, or we physically can't continue. Why? Maroth demanded. Why are you like this? Sarai was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because we know what it's like to be trapped. Not like this. Not in temporal loops, but trapped in other ways. In poverty, in systems that don't care about you, in situations where you're helpless and scared and alone. And we remember what it felt like when someone chose to help anyway. When someone decided we were worth the cost. She leaned forward. Every human alive is descended from someone who survived because another person made a choice to help. We're built from those moments. And when we hear 600 billion people trapped in an eternal nightmare, we don't get to choose whether it's worth it. We already made that choice when we evolved to be the kind of species that helps. The briefing ended. The dives continued. On the 9th day, Archivist Yulo requested a private meeting with Commander Okoye and Investigator Kessa. They met in a secured research lab aboard the Axiom's Rest. Yulo's pressure suit was dimly lit, her bioluminescence muted. I've been studying the phenomenon, she said without preamble, trying to understand why it happens, why consciousness attracts the folding. And, Sarai asked. I believe I understand. The folding is attracted to unexamined consciousness, minds that exist without questioning their own existence, species that live without doubt, without philosophical introspection, without constantly interrogating reality. Eulo's lights pulsed. The Veltran, the Kethran, all the species historically affected by the folding. They're all societies built on certainty. They know who they are. They know their place in the universe. They don't doubt. Kessa's mandibles clicked. And doubt matters. Why? Because doubt is a form of quantum observation. When you question your own existence, when you're uncertain about reality, your consciousness exists in a superposition of state. You're simultaneously a certain and uncertain, real and unreal. That superposition makes you. Eulo searched for the word. Slippery. The folding can't get a clean grip. It's like trying to phase shift something that's already in multiple phases. Sarai had gone very still. Are you saying humans are immune because we doubt ourselves? Not just doubt, existential uncertainty. Your entire culture is built on questions you can't answer. Why are we here? What's the purpose of existence? Is reality? You've been asking these questions for your entire evolutionary history. You've built philosophies, religions, art forms, entire civilizations around the concept of uncertainty. So we're immune by accident, Kessa said slowly, because we're philosophically neurotic. In crude terms, Eulo's lights flickered in what might have been amusement, but it means something else too. It means other species can develop immunity if they learn to question, to doubt, to exist in uncertainty. You're talking about cultural transformation, Sarais, teaching entire civilizations to think differently. I'm talking about evolution, Eulo corrected. Philosophical evolution. The species that survive, the folding, will be the ones who learn to live with questions instead of answers, uncertainty instead of certainty, doubt instead of faith. How long would that take? Generations, maybe centuries. We don't have centuries, Kessa said. We have weeks before the divers are exhausted. What do we do for the billions who won't be retrieved in time? Eulo's lights dimmed. That's the impossible choice. Investigate. The folding will eventually move on. Historical precedent suggests approximately 200 years. Those who remain trapped will persist, conscious but isolated, until the folding passes. And then they're fractured beyond recovery. Sarai finished. Empty. Yes, the room was silent. Then we teach the next generation, Sarai said quietly. We make sure this never happens again. We spread doubt like a vaccine. We teach every species in the galaxy to question, to wonder, to exist in uncertainty. You're talking about fundamentally altering galactic culture, Kessa said. Yes, and we're going to do it, Sarai stood, because the alternative is watching billions more suffer what these people are suffering, and I'm not okay with that. She left the lab. Kessa watched her go. She means it, Eulo observed. I know, Kessa replied. That's what scares me. On the 14th day, Commander Okoye led a dive personally. She hadn't dived since the operation began. Command responsibilities kept her on the bridge, coordinating teams, but they'd identified the most densely populated world still in the affected zone. 80 billion people, a core world. If they could mount a major synchronized dive, hit multiple cities simultaneously, they might pull out 5, maybe 10 million. It would require every functional diver they had left. 42 people, to save 10 million, out of 80 billion. Sarai assembled the dive teams personally, looked each one in the eye. This is the big one, she told them. We're going deep, staying long. It's going to hurt. Some of us might not come back the same, but those people down there have been trapped for 2 weeks now. Millions of loops, millions of moments of fear and confusion. They need us. One of the divers, a young man barely out of training, raised his hand. Commander, I've got 2 dives left in, maybe 3. After this, I'm done. Neural coherence is too fragmented. I know, Sarai said gently. Is it worth it? Burning out for a few thousand people when billions will stay trapped? Sarai was quiet for a long moment. Ask me that question again after we pull them out, after you see their faces, after you feel their relief. Then tell me if it was worth it. The young man nodded. The dive happened at 0400 station time. 42 human divers descending simultaneously into 42 different locations across the planet. Kessa watched from the observation bay, monitoring all feeds at once. It was beautiful and terrible. She watched divers synchronize with trapped populations, watched them experience loops, moments of joy, fear, mundane routine, all frozen in eternal repetition. Watched them anchor to those moments, hold them, pull. She watched reality fold and unfold, and she watched people wake up, millions of them, confused, terrified, but alive, conscious, free. The divers came out changed. Several collapsed immediately. Neural coherence shattered. Medical teams rushed in. Others walked away under their own power, but their eyes were empty, distant, seeing things no one else could see. Sarai was the last one out. She'd pulled 86,000 people from a densely populated residential complex. When she emerged from the shuttle, she couldn't stand. Her team carried her to medical. Kessa waited outside the medical bay for 3 hours before the doctors cleared her to visit. Sarai was awake, lying on a bed, staring at the ceiling. Neural monitoring equipment blinked softly beside her. 10,200,000, Kessa said quietly. That's how many you pulled out today. Not enough, Sarai replied.
Commander, it's not enough. Sarai's voice was hollow. There are still billions down there, and I just spent 4 hours experiencing a moment of someone tucking their child into bed, over and over, thousands of times. The love in that moment, the tenderness, the safety, and now that parent knows their child is still trapped, and I can't get them out. You saved 10 million people today. I left 70 billion behind. Kessa sat down beside the bed. You're not a god, Commander. You're just a person who's done more than anyone had the right to ask. It's not enough, Sarai repeated. Then, softer, it's never enough. The folding began to dissipate on the 19th day. It didn't leave cleanly. The dimensional membrane fractured, releasing some regions while still holding others. The boundary became irregular, unpredictable. Some worlds woke up, others remained trapped. The final count was brutal. Total retrieved 47 million people. Total lost 633 billion. The retrieval corps had exhausted every diver. 19 were permanently incapacitated, their neural patterns too fragmented to recover. The rest would need years of therapy, rehabilitation, support. They'd saved 47 million lives by destroying 42 of their own. Galactic Council convened to address the aftermath. Maroth Ven, surprisingly, was the one to propose the memorial. A monument, he said, voice uncharacteristically soft. For those we lost, and for those who gave everything trying to save them. The monument was constructed in orbit above the first affected world. A simple structure, 42 beams of light reaching into the dark, one for each diver who'd broken themselves saving others. At the dedication ceremony, investigator Kessa Hearn gave the primary address. She stood before representatives of 300 species and spoke about humans. We called them dangerous, she said. We quarantined them. We told ourselves it was for our protection. But we were wrong about what made them dangerous. They're not dangerous because they're violent. They're dangerous because they're willing to sacrifice, because they'll walk into hell to pull out people they've never met, because they can't not help. She paused. The humans didn't save everyone. They saved a fraction. But that fraction, those 47 million people, they're alive because someone chose to carry their pain, to experience their fear, to hold their moment of terror, and bear it so they wouldn't have to. We should have called them sooner. We should have trusted them. We should have known that a species capable of such sacrifice would never be the monsters we feared. The ceremony ended. The memorial lights shone. Commander Sarai Okoye stood at the viewing port of the Endurance, preparing to depart. Kessa found her there. Your people are leaving? Kessa asked. Back to the quarantine zone. They need rest. Real rest. Years of it, probably. Will you return? If you call again, we'll answer. Sarai smiled. Tired. That's what we do. Why? Kessa asked. The question she'd been holding for 3 weeks. Why do you do this to yourselves? Sarai looked out at the memorial lights. Because someone has to. And because we know what it's like to be trapped. Maybe not in temporal loops, but in other kinds of prisons. Fear, despair, loneliness, and we remember what it felt like when someone chose to open the door. She turned to Kessa. We're not heroes, investigate. We're just people who remember being helped, and we're trying to pass that forward. That sounds like heroism to me. Then you don't know humans very well yet. Sarai extended her hand, the human gesture of trust. But maybe you'll learn. Kessa took the hand, held it. The council is establishing cognitive resilience academies, Kessa said, teaching philosophy, encouraging doubt and questions, trying to vaccinate civilizations against future folding events. Would you be willing to share your expertise? Send us the curriculum. We'll contribute. And the quarantine, Sarai's smile was sad, remains in place until the galaxy decides we're not dangerous anymore. After what you did, after what we did, some species will be grateful, others will be more afraid than ever. Sarai shrugged. That's okay, we're used to it. We'll keep helping anyway, because that's who we are. The human ships departed 3 hours later, small vessels disappearing into fold space, carrying their broken divers home to heal. Kessa watched them go. Beside her, Tellen's crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. What are you thinking? The Ketsari asked. That we were wrong about humans, because they're not dangerous? No, Kessa turned away from the viewport. Because they're more dangerous than we ever imagined. Not because they'll hurt us, because they'll shame us. Every time we calculate cost before helping, every time we choose safety over sacrifice, every time we walk past someone suffering because it's not our problem, the humans will be there, helping, sacrificing, carrying burdens we wouldn't touch. And that makes them dangerous? It makes them a mirror. Kessa replied, and we don't like what we see. The 47 million retrieved were integrating back into society. Though many carried psychological scars that would never fully heal, the cognitive resilience academies were opening across the galaxy, teaching children to question, to wonder, to exist in uncertainty. It was working. Slowly, a signal pinged on her console, new data from deep space observation drones. She pulled up the feed and froze. Another region of space had gone silent, not as large as before, just 3 systems, but the pattern was identical. The folding was back. Tellen sat very still for a long moment. Then she reached for the emergency beacon transmitter. Her hand hovered over the activation button. On the screen, the 3 silent systems glowed red. Somewhere in quarantine space, 42 broken divers were trying to heal. Tellen pressed the button. The beacon activated. The message transmitted. They're coming again, she thought. They'll answer, even though it destroys them. They'll answer. And somewhere in human space, alarms began to sound. Ships began to wake, and people who'd sacrificed everything prepared to do it again, because someone had asked, and they were the only ones who could help. The galaxy learned something in those dark weeks, that strength isn't about weapons or shields. It's about being willing to carry what others cannot. The humans taught us, and though their lesson came at terrible cost, it's one we can never forget. But as the retrieval corps answered that second call, one question echoed through council chambers and research labs across known space. Where had humans learned to navigate consciousness itself? What had happened during those 319 years of quarantine to prepare them for walking through nightmares? That answer lies in human history. In a moment when their own world nearly fell to something worse than the folding. And it's a story the galaxy is only beginning to understand.